All right, in some other recasting news, Rory McCann will be replacing the late Ray Stevenson as Baylan Skoll for Ahsoka Season 2. McCann is best known for playing the Hound in Game of Thrones, but his roster of work also includes Gladiator II, Hot Fuzz, Clash of the Titans, and more. Ahsoka is part of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau's Mandoverse, and Filoni will return as showrunner for Season 2. As we discussed in the last story, replacing an actor can be difficult. Does McCann face challenges in hyperspace?
And also, as we discussed in the last story, this is a very different situation. So, unfortunately, Ray Stevenson passed away before Ahsoka Season 1 aired. So it was always probably going to be known that character was going to be recast. It's just kind of been a matter of who. And I know Liev Schreiber was definitely my front runner. Like, as soon as I saw that fan casting, I was like, Liev Schreiber would be really awesome in this role. But I think that Rory McCann will do a great job. I have to confess, I don't know him as an actor because, of course, I haven't seen Game of Thrones. Don't worry, it's coming eventually. But I think that, he's surrounded by a really strong cast in Ahsoka. I think that Stevenson left an amazing template for him to follow as the character of Baylan Skoll, and certainly they're not going to let him fail in the role by any means. And I think generally the fan base knew like this role was going to have to be recast based on how they left Season 1. So I think good for him that he gets to fill the shoes, and I'm sure he'll try to do it justice. And it is just a very different feeling of, a role like T'Challa that Chadwick played, was singular and very important and very special. And so the weight of it has to feel a little different, not totally, and not trying to disrespect Ray Stevenson by any means, but, that was like a very monumental thing. And then this is more along the lines of things that happen all the time in movies and TV shows, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it'll be great.
Yeah, with Chadwick Boseman, it had a lot to do with the representation that he was putting forth, and like a number of people and what they meant to him, what he meant to everyone, and it's a very different cultural moment. And yeah, Ray Stevenson, I think it's also just how you ended that Season 1. Like that character is essential going forward. Mm-hmm. Like he is a huge part of the ongoing story that just needs to be resolved. You can change out the main character like they did with Black Panther, but like he is one of the in mid action, it hasn't been resolved. Like he is going forward towards his goal, and the other characters are racing him to that goal. Like that character can't just disappear. And so I think this was essential recasting. I think that Ray Stevenson's performance in Season 1 elevated that show so much. It is really hard for me to imagine anyone taking over that role and doing it justice. Roy McCann is good. I have seen Game of Thrones. He's a really great part of it. And he has some similar elements to the Baylan Skoll character. This character that's like, there's something dark about you, but there's also a heart. Seems like there's a heart somewhere in there, and and if we peel the layers back, are we going to find more darkness or more light? And it's just hard to know. I think he does that really well in Game of Thrones. I don't know if he. I don't consider him. I've only seen him in Game of Thrones. I've only seen him as the Hound. I don't consider him as high caliber an actor as Ray Stevenson. Mm-hmm. He's great on Game of Thrones, but I just don't. It doesn't feel like there's as much internal life happening as I felt with Ray Stevenson. Part of that might be that he had passed away, and we were all paying attention to the role more, and he really did. I just think he elevated the show. It was just killer. So Roy McCann has the look. Like, I think he can look right. He can pull it off. He's been in high caliber stuff before. I'm just hopeful in Game of Thrones and in Gladiator. I haven't seen these other roles, but if there's sort of this like Clash of the Titans, Game of Thrones, he plays this big brute, and I'm hoping he can pull off a different kind of character and to bring Baylan Skoll back to life, because I think such an important part of Ahsoka, and like I am so bummed that we don't get to see Ray Stevenson's Season 2. Yeah, it's really a bummer. one of the best, one of the most like lived in performances of Star Wars in the last few years. I love it so much.
Yeah, it should also be said too that Rory McCann and Ray Stevenson were friends, like they were close, and so
That's nice.
the idea of recasting. I mean, I usually never have that much of a problem with recasting. I mean, like we've talked about, the T'Challa thing was very different. It was just it was so shocking, it was so sudden, and it just that's the direction that Ryan Coogler wanted to take the franchise, and that's how he wanted to honor him, and so it was a totally different situation. But as you move into thinking about, art and artists, they support their art. They want to see they're friends with the people who produce these shows and who are on these shows. And a lot of times, the people that know them, and they would say, like, this person wants this to continue. Like, they loved being on this show. They want this character to continue. It's, a recasting doesn't have to be like a disrespectful thing. I mean, it can be an honoring thing to recast somebody, just in the same way as what Ryan Coogler did with T'Challa can be an honoring thing. It can kind of, all of these things can coexist together in terms of recasting. But I agree with you, Matt. I loved Ray Stevenson in that role. I just thought he just brought so much through his, just the way that just the way that you read his face, the way that he stood, the way that he interacted with other people. It was just on a different level. And Rory McCann, can he bring that? Probably to some level, but it's just it's a personality thing. It's going to feel a little weird at first. I think it will feel a little jarring, especially if you go back and you rewatch Ahsoka season 1 before you watch Ahsoka season 2. I think there will take a little bit of adjustment there. I think there'll be a little bit of like, that's supposed to be that guy, and that will kind of be something that your brain is going to have to do. But I think once you get over that hump, it will be fine. I mean, we've seen him in Game of Thrones, and as the Hound, he is this kind of, like you said, this brute character. But that's kind of what Baylan Skoll was as well. Like, this idea of this, like, I mean, we talked about that when we talked about his lightsaber fights, how he was just like a brute. He would just hit harder. Ahsoka would fight a lot like more like with finesse and quick, and he was just like heavy hitting, type thing. And if you're bringing somebody in to replace that, like, Rory McCann probably fits that pretty well.
I don't think of Ray Stevenson as that tall.
He's a big dude.
I do think of Rory McCann as very tall, so I was just looking it up. Like, Rory McCann is 6'6", I think it says.
Damn.
Which is very tall. But Ray Stevenson was 6'3". That's just both very tall dudes.
I just rewatched Ahsoka over my winter break, and he's a big dude.
Yeah, apparently so. Apparently so.
Yeah. It's very imposing.
I think the myriad reasons that this recasting was so necessary have been explored pretty thoroughly here. So I will hone in on Rory McCann and his acting and his career thus far, and his chops, and not to take anything away from Ray Stevenson, but in terms of this, like, comparing Rory McCann's ability to Ray Stevenson's, I think it's just a matter of not having as many opportunities. Because, looking back on the character of the Hound, and I'm going to avoid spoilers for the character of the Hound, but thinking about all of the characters across Game of Thrones and the entirety of that show, the Hound really does stand out as being such a character that goes on such a journey, thinking about where he started and where he ended up. And I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of, like, seeing a character that is capable of some really, really heinous things, but there is a sense of honor, and slowly but surely you start to warm up to, and you never fully warm up to the guy, but you start to understand the inner workings and gain an appreciation for his journey and the honor that he does have and the people that he holds in respect there. So all that being said, I am pretty excited for this casting. I think he's got the chops. All of the other things that have been brought up, the fact that he was friends with Ray Stevenson, having worked on a show like Game of Thrones, I think that alone, just working on something high budget, high concept, having to wear the costumes, having to deal with the long hours and the physical strain, I think he's already proved that he can do that. So the one movie that got brought up that I completely did not even realize that he was in was Gladiator II, which is funny because it was so recent. And I hesitate to bring it up because I don't think it's a credit to how memorable the role was. But when I realized who he played in that movie, to be fair, it is a very different gear from the Hound. So that does give me a little bit of hope and optimism.
You just watched a clip from Multiverse News. If you liked it, go to our channel. We got a whole episode that it comes from. So go check that out and hit the like and subscribe. And we got lots of clips you'll enjoy, but also full hour-long episodes of Multiverse News with lots of things that don't even make it to clips. So check us out.
You stay clippy.